Welcome, friends. You're watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we have a genuinely packed agenda. So many developments have accumulated that we'll need to work through them carefully and without rushing. Before we begin, I want to address each of you personally. If you watch this channel regularly, if you value analysis without hysteria or propaganda, please subscribe right now and make sure you hit the bell icon, enabling all notifications. YouTube is actively suppressing this type of content. The platform's algorithms are increasingly pushing military analytical channels into shadow bans, and thousands of subscribers simply never receive notifications about new uploads. The bell is the only reliable way to stay informed. Do it now before you forget, and let's get into it. So then, April 24th, 2026. Let's break it all down in order. Kupiansk direction. Agony on the eastern bank. Arguably the most resonant story of the day is unfolding on the Kupiansk sector of the front. It appears that the months-long struggle for the eastern bank of the Oskol River is now approaching its denouement, and that denouement is clearly not going in Ukraine's favor. Today, the Ukrainian segment of the internet has been flooded with both official statements from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and photographic materials that, frankly, make for grim viewing. The subject is units of the 14th Brigade of the AFU deployed precisely on the eastern bank of the Oskol. According to incoming reports, individual detachments of this brigade have been without normal supply for weeks, no water, no food, effectively abandoned at their positions. The photographs circulating online are an eloquent confirmation of these claims. Add to this the reported dismissals of the commander of the 14th Brigade and the commander of the 10th Army Corps of the AFU. When heads roll at that level, it is generally a reliable indicator of systemic failure, not merely a local tactical setback. Simultaneously, new footage emerged today from the southeastern part of Kupiansk Vovchansk. The recordings clearly show the movement of Russian reconnaissance and sabotage groups and individual units in the area of a garage cooperative. Ukrainian FPV drone operators are tracking these movements and attempting to engage, which is itself telling. If the enemy is filming your troops right in the middle of urban blocks, he is already embedded there in considerable strength. The strike location was geolocated without difficulty. It is worth recalling that just a few days ago, similar footage was released from a slightly more northern area of the city, along Volodymyr Sosura Street, also showing close-quarters combat and Russian army positions near a specific building. In total, over the past several days alone, we have received a substantial series of geolocated confirmations of Russian unit presence within Kupiansk Vovchansk. The weight of this evidence has prompted a map correction. The zone of confident Russian control has been expanded, and the territory under AFU control has been reduced accordingly. Individual Ukrainian units are, according to available information, still maintaining a presence on the eastern bank of the Oskol. However, just yesterday a series of video recordings appeared showing scattered AFU groups retreating westward from the eastern bank, through the settlement of Osinovo. The picture being assembled is fairly unambiguous. The Vovcha bridgehead, the next pressure point. Continuing the discussion of the Kupiansk and northeastern Kharkiv direction, another important thread demands attention. Several pro-Russian sources today report that fighting has broken out for the northeastern bridgehead on the Vovcha River. Russian units are advancing in the vicinity of Mykolaiivka and Mala Vovcha. This bridgehead is one of the most remote, and consequently most logistically vulnerable, positions on this sector. Holding it under pressure from multiple directions is extremely difficult. It is quite plausible that as Russian forces advance deeper into the Siversky Donets forest zone, the Ukrainian side will opt for a regrouping toward more defensible positions, in the direction of Bilyi Kolodyaz and Malyi Burluk. That would be a rational decision, even though it would mean another territorial concession. Additional context is provided by the sustained strike activity across the entire interfluve between the Oskol and Siversky Donets rivers. Morning Geron-type drone strikes on Balaklia have been recorded, as well as LMUR missile strikes on Sinkivka. The intensity of strikes against the latter settlement raises the possibility that Russia may be considering a crossing of the Oskol south of Kupiansk, with the aim of establishing a new bridgehead. If this hypothesis proves correct, and for now it remains a hypothesis requiring confirmation, This direction could become one of the key theaters of operations in the weeks ahead. Sloviansk direction. Kriva Luka on the brink of encirclement. Moving southward, to the Sloviansk direction, where developments are equally deserving of close attention. The focal point here is the settlement of Kriva Luka. According to the latest data, Russian units have entered a wooded area running along Donetsk Street. And that, it should be noted, is effectively the last remaining supply and evacuation route for Ukrainian units holding this settlement. When the main artery comes under threat of being cut, that generally means either imminent encirclement or a forced withdrawal. The chronological context here is important. On April 20th, footage was released of heavy Sontsepek thermobaric system strikes against this forest area. The following day, recordings appeared of multiple launch rocket system strikes against the wooded ground to the west. And within just 2 to 3 days, forward movement by assault groups is being recorded. This is a textbook artillery preparation ahead of a ground assault, playing out before our eyes in real time. The outcome is predictable. Either Kriva Luka will find itself in full encirclement within the next hours or days, or the Ukrainian side will opt for an organized withdrawal toward Kostiantynivka. Either way, the front line on this sector will be corrected. The only question is one of timing and specifics. Seversky Donets Donbas Canal, a bridgehead opposite Kramatorsk. Slightly further south, another significant development is unfolding. Sources on both sides of the conflict today confirm Russian army advances in the area of the Seversky Donets Donbas Canal. According to available data, Russian units have established control over the canal on the stretch from Novomarkov to the bridge along the M03 highway. The fact that this is being confirmed by both pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian analysts lends the report a reasonably high degree of credibility. Simultaneously, strikes on AFU positions in Malinivka and Tikhonivka are being recorded. Activity on this sector has remained elevated since the beginning of April. The strategic logic is not difficult to read. Crossing the Seversky Donets Donbas Canal and establishing a full-scale bridgehead opposite Kramatorsk would give the Russian army the ability to impose partial artillery control over the city and its key logistical routes, most importantly, the H20 highway. And in the longer term, it would create conditions for an operation aimed at cutting the entire Sloviansk-Kostiantynivka agglomeration into isolated segments, each of which could then be dealt with separately. Strategically, that would be a serious step forward. We will be tracking developments along the canal with heightened attention. Kostiantynivka direction, the war of infiltration. On the Kostiantynivka direction, there are no cartographic changes today, but there is something that may ultimately prove more significant. Pro-Western and pro-Ukrainian analysts have begun publishing a wave of reports indicating that the Russian side has, literally in the past few days, shifted to a strategy of active infiltration. Pairs and trios of assault groups, potentially dozens, possibly hundreds, are continuously filtering through the defensive lines of Kostiantynivka. Strikes are being recorded against positions of the 156th Brigade and against units of the 3rd Brigade of the AFU in the vicinity of Tatianivka. Infiltration is a precursor. When it reaches critical mass, the map begins to change rapidly. That is precisely why, on the Kostiantynivka direction, what deserves attention right now is not the absence of immediate corrections, but the fact of accelerating activity. One further telling detail, in the area of Dovobalka, Russian forces have been systematically dropping leaflets over several consecutive weeks, urging Ukrainian units to surrender or withdraw without resistance. The first instances were recorded at the start of April. Another wave came on the 19th. Today they came again, leaflets accompanied by detailed instructions. One might be tempted to dismiss this as a psychological gimmick, but the methodical persistence of this practice sends a clear signal. The assault is coming, and Russia is preemptively offering the opposing side a psychological exit. Whether it works or not is a separate question. The regularity of these drops points unambiguously to the fact that the active phase on this sector is not far off. Zaporizhzhia direction, Huliapol in the cauldron, and now, arguably the most significant operational development of the past 24 hours. The Zaporizhzhia front has delivered a genuinely substantial surprise. Russian units have managed to considerably improve their positions in the area of Huliapole. For several consecutive days, we have been tracking a slow, almost imperceptible infiltration of Russian groups through the ground between Charivna, Huliapole, and Novoselivka. Analysts were adding grey zones and infiltration zones to maps, attempting to reconstruct the actual configuration of the front. Today, that picture has crystallized considerably. The first geolocated footage has appeared from the southeastern outskirts of Novoselivka. In it, units of the 108th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade of the AFU are striking at forward positions, and Russian reconnaissance groups already on the settlement's outer edge. The conclusion drawn from this is of fundamental importance. Russian groups have bypassed Huliapole and Charivin, bypassing between the two settlements and emerging behind them. The logistics of those villages, supply routes, evacuation corridors, appear to be under Russian physical control. In other words, Huliapole is currently, in all probability, either fully or operationally encircled. This means that in the very near future, most likely ahead of the May holidays, the Russian Ministry of Defense will officially confirm advances on this sector. The Zaporizhzhia front has not seen changes of this scale in a single day for quite some time. Western Zaporizhzhia direction, the build-up before the holidays. Further west of Orikhiv, the situation also merits detailed examination. Here, what is taking shape may well be the groundwork for a major operation in the period after the May holidays. The map today is being corrected in the northwestern outskirts of Magdalenivka, based on footage recording strikes against Ukrainian positions on this sector. The broader context: the Ukrainian side is currently making active efforts to occupy the grey zone between the Konska River and the settlements of Stepnohursk and Kamenske, west of Orikhiv. Yesterday we examined data indicating that, by pro-Ukrainian estimates, Russia has concentrated up to 5 air assault divisions in this area, alongside several assault brigades and special operations units. Ukrainian intent is clear enough: to push south of the Konska River ahead of time, establish a first defensive echelon, meet a potential offensive on the forward approaches, and thereby buy time. When movement begins, and by all indications, that will happen after the May holidays, Russian units will encounter not a vacuum, but a saturated defensive line. This is the standard tactic of delaying an advance. The first wave is absorbed by forward positions, while the next defensive line is hastily reinforced behind it. Both sides are now preparing for an active phase. The wait is likely to be short. Ukraine's mobilization, a shrinking deadline. One further development demands attention, a political dimension that is becoming increasingly intriguing as the deadline approaches. Today, April 24, 2026, approximately 2 weeks remain until the expiry of martial law and the mobilization period in Ukraine, with the cutoff falling approximately on May 6th. Yet the relevant extension bills have still not been submitted to the Verkhovna Rada. Typically, such legislation is introduced between the 10th and 21st of the month. It is now late April, and there is no movement in that direction whatsoever. Whether this reflects a procedural delay, a political negotiation in progress, or something more substantial remains unclear. But the fact itself is anomalous and warrants continued monitoring. Middle East, the countdown to Saturday. In closing, a few words on the Middle Eastern theater. The number of sources forecasting a resumption of active hostilities in the region in the very near term continues to grow. One detail is particularly noteworthy. Virtually every analyst tracking this region agrees that no military action is likely before the close of trading on Friday, April 24th, not until oil prices have settled. Once the markets close and the price locks in until Monday, April 27th, the picture could change sharply. At present, oil is trading in the range of $95 to $105 per barrel, depending on the grade. It appears set to carry that level into the weekend. A telling corroborating detail: the Chinese embassy in Iran has issued an urgent notice urging Chinese nationals to leave the country immediately or relocate to safe locations. The historical parallel is difficult to ignore. Beijing issued a near-identical notice on February 27th, just hours before the launch of Operation Epic Fury. History, as is well known, does not repeat itself verbatim, but it does rhyme. The next 24 to 48 hours will bring considerably more clarity. That concludes today's briefing. Thank you sincerely to each and every one of you for watching and for staying with us. Remember, subscribing and hitting the bell are not merely buttons. They are your way of supporting independent analysis at a time when YouTube's algorithms are steadily pushing this kind of content into the shadows. Without your support, this channel simply will not reach the people who need it. Take care of yourselves. Until the next broadcast.